feel like people are sort of waking up, Chris, to that Atlanta exists. And, one of the things I will say is I still don't think we tell our story well enough.
Allyson, I'm so pumped to have you here in the studio here in Atlanta. I think Atlanta is becoming one of the most incredible tech hubs in the world. I truly believe it's going to be the central, a capital of infrastructure and proptech. Now, again, that's my long-term goal. But with what's going on right now with South Downtown, with what's happening, with World Cup coming to town, and with AI and the onslaught of AI, IRL, I think, matters even more. And getting face-to-face in the places that we love like this. That's why I do my podcast in real life. So thank you for joining me.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
Of course. So I think one of the cool things that you work on, and many people may or may not know, especially outside of Atlanta, is you put on one of the largest tech events in the country for venture capitalists, founders, corporates, partners, you name it, banking. And it's such a fun event because you're bringing in people who have incredible stories to share. And it's not just for capital. It's a lot of the corporates. And I think a lot of people don't realize in Atlanta, there are some phenomenal corporates.
Oh, yeah. The Fortune 500 list is huge here.
Yeah. So can you take me through a little bit maybe about the history of Venture Atlanta and maybe, how did it begin?
Yeah.
What's this origin story there? And then about maybe a little bit of how you got involved.
Sure. Okay. Well, here we go. It's a good story. So, some of you may remember 2007, 2008, there was a big banking mortgage crisis. I was working for a mortgage company as SVP of marketing, and our company went under. And I remember the first thing I thought of is when we went bankrupt was, I don't want to do this anymore. This is not what I want. But I was not the person that had the itch to I'm going to go be a founder, an entrepreneur. That just wasn't in my DNA. I wasn't that kind of risk taker.
Sure.
And I sat and did some consulting for a few months, and one of my best friends worked at Nora Mosley Partners.
Sure.
And Alan Mosley, who actually was one of the original folks that came together with the Atlanta CEO Council, the Metro Atlanta Chamber, and TAG to form Venture Atlanta. And the impetus of it was we don't have enough capital here. Mm-hmm. So, Chris, if you go back 19 years, you could kind of name 5 funds. There wasn't the angel investors. There wasn't Atlanta Tech Village. There was so much that didn't exist. And obviously that's because Atlanta just, continues to grow. And so Venture Atlanta, they hired me, and Venture Atlanta started as just an event for Georgia companies to raise capital, to bring in investors. We had 20 companies pitch on stage, companies like Silverpop and Vocalocity and Vitru, and, some great companies that have all gone on to huge exits. And, the thought was, let's just keep going. Let's keep going with this small conference. Well, that small conference has ballooned, over the years. And I think what's happened is we realized we had something here, all of a sudden people kind of kept coming, and it was, wow, we had 500 people. Wow, we had 700 people. And then what we realized is that people in Chattanooga were like, well, can I be a part of the conference? And people in all the neighboring states and across the Southeast, and all of a sudden it was, hey, wait a minute, like Venture Atlanta could truly become the hub, and the spokes are all the cities around the Southeast. And actually, our geographic footprint goes all the way over to Texas and up to Maryland, DC, and Virginia, and down to Florida. So it's 14 states. And that conference that was 400 people that first year, where we had maybe 50 investors. Last year we had 1,650 people there and over 500 investors. And I was on a call today with a fund from Boston, and the partner was like, we come every year and we want to be more involved, and you put on one of the best conferences in the country. So hearing that from folks in Boston and in New York and in Chicago and even on the West Coast, where funds will say, the one time a year I'm coming to Atlanta, I'm coming to Venture Atlanta, and they put it on their calendar. So, it's something that I'm super proud of. I tease that I've got 3 children, a son who's 26, a daughter who's 24, and another little kid who's 19. So kind of that's kind of my joke. But
the conference is the 19.
The conference is the 19-year-old, if everyone didn't get that. But it just continues to grow. And what I love is that because we've got such an active board, we iterate every year and we continue to bring new things every year and more to founders and investors.
I think it's great when we dive into that, because I think, you think about building a startup is incredibly hard. Building a company is incredibly hard. Running that company sustainably for years to come. And one of the pieces of this event isn't just capital. Capital is important, but capital alone doesn't sustain. You need customers. Customers are the best types of capital. And I think that's one of the cool things I've seen is you bring in a lot of great customers there. You bring in a lot of great talent. There's probably people actually recruiting at these events.
Or
even looking at partnerships
or looking
and
for
M&A. Jobs, yeah. But the amount of investors, it's great, but the amount of customers. So that's one thing I think is interesting is you've got some big names that come year after year after year to support it. Do you want to talk about any of those companies that maybe have surprised you? I think of, like, for me, something that surprised me, I didn't realize Intercontinental Exchange was such a powerhouse here. You think of them as the New York Stock Exchange in New York, but you actually realize they have an entire entity here, and they are very involved in real estate and financial markets and clearinghouses.
Jeff Sprecher spoke at our conference year 2.
Amazing.
In 2009, way before the New York Stock Exchange.
Amazing.
And his story was fantastic, even then, and obviously there's a lot more now. But no, you're exactly right, Chris, is that, I think a lot of times founders feel like, should I only come to Venture Atlanta if I'm raising capital? And that is so far from the truth, right? So, that your ticket is under $400. You're getting fed like 6 meals. I think I figured it out. Like, you're kind of getting fed for 2 days. There's dinners, there's cocktail parties, there's all sorts of breakfasts. And we've done a lot of things over the last couple of years, really proud of. One of the things we did a couple of years ago was start doing these executive sessions. So we brought in founders, just call it, who have been there and done that. Whether it's talking about go-to-market strategy, sales, building your sales pipeline, how to hire talent, and I'm, not remembering everything. But people like a Jeff Perkins, who's run a bunch of great companies here in town and who now runs one of our alumni, Soundstripe, or Kelly Gay, who's been an incredible CEO, or Mark Gorlin, who, runs Rody. I mean, these are people that founders have had an opportunity to spend 45 minutes with in a really small, intimate setting, like 30 people, 40 people, and really kind of an ask me anything type format. So we want founders to feel like they're leaving Venture Atlanta with a playbook, with a, here are questions, and they'll know in advance, like who they're going to meet with and such. So that's just one avenue. The other thing is, like you were saying, who's come. Cox Enterprises has been an incredible partner with us. Jack Semrau actually sits on our board. But we've had Home Depot. We've had great relationships with Chick-fil-A, with Georgia Pacific, with Georgia Power and companies like that. So, we're sitting right in the middle of so many incredible Fortune 500 companies. And you look at, like, this year, Scott Lopano is our chairman, who actually helps run Engage. And, Engage is an incredible fund that, Georgia Tech leaned in, Blake Patton, leading it. And,
Georgia Tech.
You've got
Delta Airlines.
And Inspire Brands and, incredible, Wellstar, just great groups that are involved. So I think there's so many opportunities. And then you've got, like, this other group that comes to Venture Atlanta. You've got, 150 or 200 students that come to Venture Atlanta.
Very cool.
Students who are either MBA students, they could be PhD students. They're from Georgia Tech, they're from Emory, they're from Clemson, Duke, all over the country. They're looking for jobs. They're looking to be your dev team, your coders, your whatever, the case may be. So I think there's just always something for everybody at Venture Atlanta. And I think that's what's really cool.
Well, and even maybe seeding some of those folks, I always find that, in tough times, and we talked about this earlier before this podcast, is that, certain industries have cycles, and so does venture. But startups, especially in tough times, we started, our company in a very tough time in San Francisco. And when people get laid off or let go, they actually go and build.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have the expertise and they go, I'm going to go build something. I'm smart enough to do it and believe in myself. I think one of the other things that stands out to me from my Venture Atlanta experience is the speakers that you have. Having Mayor Andre Dickens and some incredible, you have a great investor panel, and you have founders who've exited. So can you tell me about, obviously some of the great speakers, you had Tim Dorr one year, that was impressive. I think you also had Garrett from Flock. So you've had people like David Cummings, who have built incredible and very well known to the up-and-comers.
3 people from Shark Tank.
Amazing. Yeah. Okay.
Mark Cuban, Laura Grenier, Robert Herkovic. I will say Mark Cuban was probably one of the most dynamic.
Okay.
Standing room only, people begging for tickets. We were at the College Football Hall of Fame. We've done all building teams, so we've had a lot of professional athletes.
Very cool.
So we had Dr. J from the Philadelphia 76ers. Yeah. We had Champ Bailey, and so I'm a Florida Gator, and Champ Bailey's big, obviously Georgia Bulldog. And when the funny thing is, I'll never forget, I was sitting in the front row, and when he was talking, and I was doing my Gator chomp, and he was just laughing because it was just funny, doing that. But we had Marcus Allen from the Raiders and different things, and it was funny. My parents actually came to that conference because my dad had always wanted to meet Marcus Allen, so that was kind of fun. Dawn Staley, we had a couple years ago from USC, incredible basketball coach. I have a niece and a nephew who graduated from there. But why we have some of those people is their stories. Building teams. How to be a great leader. Things like that. So, we've had the former CEO of Box that flew in from Silicon Valley. We've had several people like that. Steve Case spoke years ago. We've had some really good speakers over the years. I have selfies with Mark Cuban, with Ludacris, with all sorts of folks.
Well, yeah, I think that's what's great is every year it gets better and better. I hear. So obviously, people question, Atlanta makes up only about 2% of the U.S. population, right? Just under that. Obviously, very low in terms of the venture capital, but the talent of Georgia Tech and continuing to build, and I'm seeing new clubs popping up here, like Robotics Club and Hardware Club and Fintech Club and all these groups. And it seems like now, I grew up in, we built our startups in San Francisco, and there were startup events. I'm feeling that now. I'm seeing that here. So, I think there's the idea that these events like Adventure Atlanta is once a year, but it's really something that's building year round, right?
Yeah.
And so what are you seeing in the Atlanta ecosystem, and what is the pitch for Atlanta and the Southeast, the rise of the rest, if you will?
Well, and that's why Steve Case came to Atlanta, because of what was going on here. Obviously you've got to talk about people like David Cummings, what he's building in South Downtown. How that area is transforming around Centennial Yards and getting everything ready for the World Cup. So I was able to actually kind of, be down there a couple weeks ago touring some new spaces down there. I couldn't believe it. It was incredible. Atlanta has never been a great walkable downtown. You walk around New York City and Boston and New York and Austin and all those markets, but Atlanta really hasn't been that way. But I just think we're bringing so much to everybody. So we're transforming our downtown. We've got, incredible universities here. We've got a really strong tech practice. We've got the biggest airport in the country, obviously doing, making it easy to get around. And we have a really solid cost of living. Obviously, I live in the suburbs. You could get, not as much as you used to be able to get, but you could still, it's a lot more affordable than San Francisco or New York or, some of those other markets. But, then you look at places like Atlanta Tech Village. Again, going back to, David Cummings and David Lightburn and what ATDC has and switch yards and, but we've also now seen that sprawl into the suburbs. So you've got Tech North Atlanta, you've got Curiosity Labs, you've got Atlanta Tech Park. So we kind of, it's not anymore just a little circle around Midtown, which it used to be back in the day. Now it's truly expanding into South Downtown and expanding out. So we're just getting so many different groups involved. Obviously, we've got Atlanta Tech Week now, and we're bringing a ton of great people into town for Render ATL and all different things. But I feel like people are sort of waking up, Chris, to that Atlanta exists. And one of the things I will say is I still don't think we tell our story well enough. I think that there's an opportunity for Atlanta to beat their chest a little bit more. Even it was funny, when I was talking to my marketing team this year, I was like, we need to be bold. We need to be out there kind of going, look at what Venture Atlanta has brought. Look at what we've done. And, again, it's exciting to talk to our alumni and to hear the impact that we've made. But I think Atlanta's got to do that as well as just go, look what we have, here.
It's funny because I think about Atlanta and the ecosystem, even Georgia at a greater level, because Atlanta continues to grow, is what does it offer that other cities don't offer, like a San Francisco or Chicago or New York? I can think of multiple things. I think, having been in those cities, I love to visit those cities. And
right.
I think the thing I've realized talking to people, for me at least, is that many people have loved living there, but then they go, I'm talking to people right now in San Francisco and New York and Chicago, and they're like, I'm ready to move in the next few years because I don't want to stay here forever.
Yeah.
And that's what I've realized is longevity. Is I've met actually the founder of Loom, just moved from the Bay Area to Atlanta after they sold for almost $1 billion. And,
nice.
The people you meet. So what is it that Atlanta, from your perspective, has to offer that many other cities may or may not be able to offer, or as an opportunity for these people who do want to move here?
I think, again, there's a lot to do. There's people that you could go up to the lake, you could go hiking in the mountains, you can, you could go to the coast and go to the beach. Obviously everything's not that close, but there is a little something, for everybody. And again, you have to go back to the cost of living, and Atlanta's becoming it's becoming a food scene. Obviously we're bringing like a lot of great chefs here. I'm kind of a foodie, and there's always big festivals that are happening here, and different things that are going on. Again, I live in the suburbs, and I was just talking to someone about, hey, there's all these free cover bands that you could go to every weekend.
Yeah, instead of $200 to $300 a ticket, you're going for free.
Yeah,
and you bring the whole family. You can watch the movies on the lawn. I think one of the things you just hit on too is that people completely misunderstand or misunderstood about Atlanta is that the food scene here is ridiculous. And I think people think you have to go to New York and you have to go to San Francisco to enjoy incredible food. A lot of those people and those chefs have moved here and opened up their places. Yeah. And they are doing incredible things. For oftentimes, I thought, Allyson, when I moved here, it was going to be 10, 20% cheaper. Some of these places are 50 to 60% less.
Really?
Oh.
Okay, I didn't know that.
Because remember, minimum wage in California now at a Panera, McDonald's, they say it's 20, but a lot of times they can't keep employees for less than 25. And real estate, in both New York, there's just a massive shortage of units there, whereas we don't have that problem.
Right.
We actually have an excess of housing right now. So I'm curious, on your take there on the food side, what is some of your favorite food? And then Adventure Atlanta, with Chick-fil-A, some of these brands, a lot of food, is there going to be any kind of food surprise that you're going to try and have this year?
We can't do that much with the food because we do have to have a set caterer for Adventure Atlanta. We are mixing it up a little bit this year. So interestingly, for the investor dinner, we're going up to Colony Square. So Colony Square is been around for a long time. It literally used to just be like a hotel, food court, and some offices, right? Yep. Well, now there's all these cool restaurants there, like Roomy's Kitchen, Saints and Council. And then there's this thing called Politan Row. And someone was like, oh, we should look at that. And I was like, what is that? And so we go up there, and all I could call it is a bougie food hall, but it's super cool. And so we're taking people to the bougie food hall. With the middle of it is an awesome bar, and we could do some really cool craft cocktails and things like that. I will say I'm a big Roomy's Kitchen fan. Love going there. I think there's some great steakhouses here. And, obviously there's great steakhouses everywhere. But you could find great Mexican, great Italian, great everything. And obviously, you could spend plenty of money here, on a meal. You could be out $200 to $300, super easily. But what else is interesting in Atlanta is you could take a drive up to Dahlonega and go to the little wineries. Yes, is it the same as Napa? No. But you could have a pretty day up in North Georgia, and be in the mountains and go to, some of the wineries and see some different spots. So again, I think that's what's, some cool stuff.
I think something else I want to ask you about is, with AI happening right now in community, you hit on some of the great places to build community, to build your startup, to find other people. And I think a lot about this cross-pollination. But what is it, the history of Atlanta, my understanding is there's so much around fintech, right?
Payments Alley, Transaction Alley.
So AI, I think oftentimes Georgia Tech, people don't realize Georgia Tech, I believe, has the most astronauts that have graduated from universities there.
I did not know that.
But AI, what are you seeing from an AI standpoint? Maybe some of the companies that are standing out here, or universities like Emory, we have Georgia nearby, we have Kennesaw State. What are some of the things you're seeing maybe in AI and in technology from the academia, and from some of the companies here. Anything that stands out?
What's interesting is I'm actually working with Georgia Tech on an applied AI summit that actually there's some people that are,
cool.
So really that Atlanta is trying to kind of cement itself or put a stake in the ground as being the applied AI capital.
Okay.
So, I think Georgia Tech, my guess is that Georgia Tech probably has, additional programming, additional certifications or whatever for things. I mean, like you were talking about clubs, I'm sure there's a lot more. I mean, I think every university is looking at how do they utilize AI to improve anything. I mean, you think about it like, I was hanging out with some women the other night and it's interesting how some people, obviously they're not in tech, have no idea how to use AI, like really. And we were talking about using it for a recipe and like people were like, what do you mean you used it for a recipe? So, again, I think there's so much that's going to happen. Now, one thing is like, so my daughter is a high school math teacher. And, one thing that's obviously a challenge for teachers and a challenge for universities is the whole thing of, the kid can just, instead of doing the research paper, have Claude do it or have, OpenAI do it and stuff. So I think, there's so many opportunities with AI, but there's also so many challenges.
Yep.
And AI is also, causing, I think, some friction for a lot of people. Like one of the biggest things with college grads, they're not finding jobs, right? So companies are saying, well, I might have needed 100 people before and now I need 10 for that same thing. So I think, kind of coming full circle, a lot of those college grads may become founders, right? They're going to go, I'm going to go solve a problem and build something myself. So it's going to be so fascinating what happens in the world over the next, 10 years. I mean, even my parents, they're in their 80s and they're like, I'm sorry, what is ChatGPT? But like we showed them, and like, we're like, you could use it too.
I think there's a shift too. You've got people are moving more to technology to also to the point where like me, I shut off my phone with my son on Sundays. We have like the no phone Sunday.
Nice.
And so because it is attacking us, I now turn my devices on sleep mode during the day because I need to be in focus mode. I need to, obviously when I'm recording, but even when I'm just writing or working on something, I want to be fully immersed into that element or that writing or that project or even email and not have the distractions happen. Or if I'm on a Zoom, I used to try to multitask.
No, there's times I would like to just throw my phone away. I remember.
There's a company here that helps you. I talked with Mike Dowdle about that yesterday. What is it, Pinwheel? Pinwheel, they have the kids' phone.
Well,
right? So.
The interesting thing is I remember the first time we took our family on a cruise.
Yeah.
And it was a long time ago, and my sister has 3 kids and I have 2, and my parents went, and we all sat around the dinner table every single night, and the kids were at the point where I think they all had phones and stuff, but on the cruise we all just put them in our drawers.
Sure.
And so we sat at dinner every night for 2 hours, completely engaged and like completely talking. And my parents at the end of that week were like, that's the greatest week ever. Because the kid, like my dad would tell stories and the kids were listening to everything and the kids were kind of like, chomping at the bit for everything they said. And instead of the kids being like this, the kids were like this and, just a lot more engaged. But like, I mean, I am the worst culprit. Like I am literally in the morning, I wake up and turn my phone on, and I've definitely gotten to the point where my husband and I will be out at dinner and I'm like, okay, we got to both put our phone away. Like there's no reason to be out and to be sitting and looking down at our phone. There's nothing that important.
So as I'm doing this, I'm looking something up, which is I want to go next into giving some shout outs and the hard work. But kind of like, I think one of the important things is when you decide on advisors, investors, and of course your board. Tell us a little bit about that decision-making process because you have an incredible board.
Yeah.
You've got, I know, Joey Womack, the chair of the board this year, Scott Lopana with Engage and TechScore Ventures.
Right.
So tell me a little bit about the people behind Venture Atlanta and why you've selected some of those people.
Yeah.
If you don't mind.
So, we've been very deliberate
yes.
with our board in that there has never been, a service provider on our board. So, we want that to be very clear. So our board has been investors and founders.
Yes.
And it's been investors and founders for a reason, just because, those are our two audiences that we want to make sure that they're coming together to put on this great event. So, we've had incredible investors from Fulcrum Equity Partners, from VOCAP, from Cox Enterprises, from Engage, from Nora Mosley Partners, and obviously we've been very fortunate. We've had, from our three founders from, the Atlanta CEO Council and the Metro Atlanta Chamber and TAG. But when we look at who to put on our board, it's who wants to give back, who's willing to put in their energy and put in their time. Because understand, it is not a paid job. You're not getting any equity. You're not getting anything. You're volunteering your time. And I will tell you, someone like Scott, Elizabeth Stevens, who was the chair last year, Joey Womack, who was the chair before, you put in a lot of time. You get a lot of calls from Allyson and a lot of texts from me. I have a little team. It's me and Lexi Newhouse, who's our project manager, and then a team of contractors. So, Peter Franconi from Fulcrum said the funniest thing last week. He goes, I assumed when I joined the board that you had a team of 10. And at the time I had 0 when he joined the board, So, we have definitely always been lean and mean, but because of that, the board is tasked with investor recruiting, with company selection, with finding speakers, with helping with sponsorships, with helping with programming, with helping with strategic initiatives. And I rely very heavily on our board and listen very deeply, to our board. And definitely, if you join the board and you think it's just a board for you to sit on, we don't want you on the board.
Sure.
We want someone who's going to give their time.
It's not good for any board. Yeah. Well, and I want to close it out here because in the spirit of paying it forward, the reason we met was actually, I believe, was Ashish from the CEO Council, Ashish Thakur, and he made some incredible connections, and he's a volunteer. Usually every year, I believe.
He missed last year.
Oh, he did? Okay. Well, maybe we'll have him back this year.
He was out of town on vacation, but that's okay.
But he's a big advocate of paying it forward, improving the industry. But something he showed me, and that you do a great job, I want to shout out, is the women's event. Yeah. And you're really pushing for more opportunities for women, speaking opportunities, engagement opportunities, as well as the women's event itself. Yeah. So would you mind sharing just a little bit of that before we close out?
Absolutely. So, I could say it's a man's world. A lot of times, we'll be putting together a panel and it's, okay, great, we got our 4 guys. And I'm like, we
need some women
we need some women out there, guys. And, it's frustrating when we look at the applications and it's like, oh, good, it's 90% men and 10% women, So, if you are a founder or an investor and, you are looking at investing, or you're looking at building your company, we want you to come to Venture Atlanta. We do an incredible event that we started a couple years ago. A lady by the name of Jen Graham, she had a company called Inclusive. She actually moved to Australia last year, or New Zealand. And, but she actually used to lead these incredible discussions at this female founders dinner that we started. It has now become the event where people are like, oh my God, can I get in? Can I get in? Wow. And because it's kind of one of those situations where women, there's crying, people are really vulnerability kind of thing. But it's also where women can be themselves, and they can talk about their struggles, or, hey, I'm trying to balance my kids, my home life, and my husband, and building a company and being a founder. Or, women sometimes, I can be a little ballsy, Sure. I can be a little tough. But there's a lot of women that aren't, and that are afraid, and that are afraid of the no's, and, or women that have gone and had conversations with men. And true story, I've heard this over and over again. The questions they get asked by investors, sure, a guy wouldn't get asked. Mm-hmm. Oh, that's nice that you're building. When are you going to get pregnant? Just things that it's just so inappropriate. But the thing is, we want women to know that Venture Atlanta is a great place to be. So I'll end with this because it was pretty funny. So a couple years ago, I was at a breakfast that we had, and a couple ladies came in and they were like, the best thing just happened. And I was like, oh my God, what? They were like, there was a line at the ladies' room. And everyone was high-fiving because, there was that many people, there was that many women that there was a line. So I know that was kind of a silly thing, but it was really funny.
But it's true. Certain places you go, especially thinking about representation, right? And, leadership. A lot of times in real estate, that's a problem. Yeah. They always joke about one of the big events in real estate. It's a lot of guys in suits. Right. And so they're trying to change that. And I think you have to be really deliberate. And oftentimes that's why I say, a lot of women's events I've noticed even will invite men to make sure they have the allies and the people in the room
Right.
to hear these stories and to support. So thank you for all the hard work you're doing.
Thank you.
This is great. Again, I want you to give the website for people or the action items. What are the action items that people should take right now?
Registration's currently open for founders and for investors.
Okay.
Early bird, so cheapest tickets.
Great.
Applications go open on May 18th.
Okay.
And our website is www.ventureatlanta.org. I would say if you don't follow us on social media, you are missing out. We have posted incredible content and get, such great feedback
Where is it?
from
Is
our
it
founders. We're on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, X, Threads, you name it. We're
YouTube?
on everything. We're on YouTube. We're on everything.
Great. We're going to put this on YouTube, so great.
We're on everything. And, check out our website too. We actually are rolling out a new homepage and some new pages next week. But, look at our blog posts, look at the content. Like our team works really hard on giving great, feedback, what investors are looking for in a pitch. Like you'll just see some great case studies and thought leadership stuff.
And what are we gearing up for? Is there a giveaway at the show this year? Is there a competition of any kind?
So there is, again, the Startup Showcase. So that's for our pre-revenue companies.
Great.
And there will be one investment for $475,000.
Wow.
Yeah.
Incredible. And I think the other thing that is to not be forgotten is the success metrics. We didn't share that. What's one of the success metrics? The amount of capital or the amount?
Yes.
You've had multiple companies who met here, have pitched here, have gone on to IPO, been acquired. I mean, incredible fundraisers.
Over 1,000 alumni.
Wow.
$8.8 billion.
$8.8 billion in funding.
And over $22 billion in exits.
Wow, $22 billion in exits
so far. And my guess is we're even missing a lot.
I guarantee we just talked to some earlier who maybe we were missing. That was a small one, but I think we're on the cusp of M&A, IPOs, et cetera, right now. So I think that number is going to probably more than double right soon.
Let's hope.
Let's do it. I thank you so much for coming on.
Thanks,
I can't wait. Dates again, October
14th and 15th.
Awesome. Here in Atlanta.
Yep.
Awesome. Going to be so much fun. Thank you so much, Allyson. Cheers.
Thanks.